Welcome, everyone, to this 6-week series called The Gabrielite Work, a Relational Approach to Spirituality. And some of you watching this or participating live have been with us for quite a while through previous series of classes. For others participating, this will be new for you. And for still others who watch this on YouTube, this may be new for you. So let us begin by introducing ourselves. My name is Don Weiner. My spiritual name is Azarbash.
And I'm Diane Weiner. My spiritual name is Ravani Ra.
And we live in Corpus Christi, Texas. So we're going to be sharing with you in this series about the Gabrielite work. And there's a manual that we've written about this that you may want to get a copy of during the course of this series. I'll hold it up. It's available on Amazon. It's called Gabrielite Work, Broadband Spirituality for the 21st Century. But if you go to Amazon and you just put in the Gabrielite Work, you'll probably come across it, and it's available as an ebook or paperback book. So we'd like to begin with an invocation toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. So we'd like to begin by telling you a bit about the history of how the Gabrielite work came to be. This has been something in the process of development for, I'd say, 20 to 30 years, although we didn't have a name for it for the first at least 10 years of that. And I'm going to share my side of how it came to be, and then Ravani Ra will share her side of how it came to be. On my side, the inspirations that have become the Gabrielite work began with a series of letters, physical letters, because this was even before the internet was going, with Pir Vilayat, who was our spiritual teacher for 25 years. And I would write to him and I would share with him inspirations that were coming through in meditation. And I would only get to meet with him in person about once a year, but he was very encouraging and enthusiastic about it. And then as the years went by and the internet got going, I would communicate by email with him. And eventually, what started out as just a series of correspondences became a book called Upgrading the Operating System of the Soul, a Manual of Quantum Sufism, which is also available on Amazon. And Pir Vilayat wrote a 4-page foreword to the book. He was just extremely encouraging about it. And then I think it was in 2004, it may have been in 2005 or so, I had a chance to meet with Pir Zia, who is now the head of what's called the Inayatiyya, which at that time was called the Sufi order. And he was familiar with what was coming through, what had been coming through both Ravani Ra and myself. And he blessed us by saying that what we were teaching could be considered a part of the esoteric school of the Sufi order. Again, now it's called the Inayatiyya, which was, to my knowledge, the first time something like that ever happened, where someone who wasn't part of the actual transmission of teachers in an order was given the blessing to have their teachings be considered a part of that work. So now Ravani Ra will share her part in this picture of the development of this.
Well, a lot of what Azarbash had described is similar in the early days. When our son Dave passed away at 13 years old, it was a very difficult time for us. But part of the comfort that did come to me was from a book that was on Azarbash's shelf, something that Pir Vilayat, I believe, had recommended that he buy, called The Spiritual Body, Celestial Earth by Henry Corbin. In fact, I was wondering, I had visions at that time in regard to where Dave was, that I felt like he was encircling the earth with other beings with these beautiful emeralds. And there was actually a war on in the Gulf at that time, but the war was over in a few days. And I was searching. Somehow I thought I'd find something in this book. And indeed, it's been unfolding to me for all the years since then. All the wisdom coming through the Zoroastrian tradition to the about 1000 during the Sufis of that time received light of the Zoroastrian tradition, which really transformed Sufism in those days. So it's an incredible downpouring of light, not only in their day, but then in our day, which brought this inspiration to us. I wanted to say also that after we'd already decided on the name, the Gabrielite Work, we noticed that Pir Zia had named his son Ravan Baksh, which you could put our two names together and get that. I thought, well, what is this name? And I don't really understand. And finally, we found out that that means Gabriel. So we actually, our names together make the work that we are most interested in. So that seems like a blessing about that.
And a bit more about how the name Gabrielite Work came to be. I've been doing a monthly Sufi class for years on end. And during one class at the end, I just said, well, let's do something different. And so I invited each person to sit in the middle of the group and just tune into something that they wanted. And the people on the outside would just hold an intention that whatever the desire was for the person in the middle, that could come to light. And so I just decided I didn't have something in particular. So I said, well, I'll just take potluck. I mean, what the universe wants to offer to me. And I felt I had a real transmission from Gabriel, who I'd really never particularly thought about tuning into. But sometimes I have experiences in meditation, which I call downloads from the divine, where there's just like this condensed packet of wisdom, it feels like, that I receive the seeds of. And sometimes it may take a year to really unfold what came through. But I just really had the feeling that this was a proper title for the work that we'd already been involved in for quite some time. And Gabriel, as you may know, is the divine messenger, but almost always Gabriel is thought of as bringing a message from the divine to someone into manifestation, like the Annunciation with Mary. But I've really had the feeling that Gabriel was also the receiver of something that comes from the manifest side, the being that the message is delivered to, but also there's a returning message that goes back to the divine. It's this two-way relationship. And both of us had really been exploring in depth teachings of Ibn Arabi, Alone with the Alone, the creative imagination of Ibn Arabi. And he talks throughout that entire book about the true nature of our being as one of bi-unity, bi-unity, where we are human-divine beings. And our existence with the divine, our relationship, that relationship has no meaning. And he says some really amazing things, that neither side of that relationship has an existence or a meaning without the other side. It's the relationship between the two. So the Gabrielite work, as you will see in the course of these 6 classes, is all about relationship, and a relational way, not just to work with spiritual practices, which we would be doing in every class, but a relational way of understanding ourselves, our connection with everything else, as well as our purpose in existence. So before we do a class, each time Ravani and I will sit and we'll just kind of share some thoughts about, well, what would be good to come through. So some of the thoughts that came through about this series, I was thinking that existence involves an evolution in every area. So biologically, there's a natural evolution that's taken place in the several billion year history of the Earth, from single-celled organisms all the way up to human beings and animals and so on. And there's a principle in science of self-organization, that systems have a tendency to self-organize to higher states of organization, living systems in particular. And so spirituality is something that has to be allowed to be able to evolve. But oftentimes, spiritual systems are thought to be fixed bodies of wisdom that have been brought about by the teachings and beings of just amazing people, masters, saints, and prophets throughout human history. But often, in a sense, they're somewhat fixed, that the purpose of entering a spiritual path is to be able to partake of the wisdom that's already been put forth, which is also called the transmission. But as we're going to see in this series, and Ravani Rajanite is going to be leading off with talking about uniqueness, that each of us has something unique that we bring. And that means each of us has something to contribute to that transmission. So it's not just that we're part of whatever school we belong to, and many of us are now part of the Inayatiyya, which has an amazing transmission from even different traditions that have kind of been linked together spiritually. But each of us has something that we can bring to that transmission that would not be there except for us. You want to say something about that?
Go ahead.
Okay. And also related to this is the purpose of the spiritual path. So Hazrat Inayat Khan is the great being that brought Sufism to the West in the early part of the 1900s. And he said that the purpose of spirituality is awakening in life. Whereas in major spiritual traditions such as Buddhism and yoga, generally the purpose is thought to be a going back to the source, or a reaching a state beyond manifestation, and there's a dissolution or a dissolving of personal identity, and just merging into a really indescribable state of being. But what Hazrat Inayat Khan brought was something different. It was saying it was so divinity could awaken in life. And we're going to be talking about, well, what does that mean? What is the life that that divinity awakens to? Is it the same thing, just kind of this general divinity that we just bring through ourselves like we're an empty channel? And we're going to see that, no, it's the way that we have a contribution to make to the way that comes through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in what we're sharing here, the purpose of spirituality is not to merge. The purpose is to fulfill the purpose that we have. And we're going to be talking about desire, that every desire began with a divine impulse, but rather than thinking, well, we're just supposed to get in touch with the blueprint of that impulse and just put it through exactly as written. No, we transform that impulse by our experiences, and we creatively bring something back to the divine side of things. And now something arises from our relationship between our human and divine sides that couldn't come from either side by itself. So again, it's all about the relationship. Pir Vilayat would talk about that which transpires behind that which appears. And we're going to be talking about ways to develop subtle senses and a principle called Tawil, T-A-W-I-L, which means harmonic perception, being in a state of connection with what we're experiencing, that we're not just like objectively over here looking at it and kind of taking notes about it. Well, I see that rose, it's red, it smells like this, here's the seeds and the parts of it. We're establishing a connection in such a way that what we're in relationship with reveals a much deeper aspect of the reality of what it is.
Okay. So in many traditions and ways of understanding things, there are usually concepts to learn. But in developing this study, we decided that we would like to, rather than close things down in all these different ways, like a concept can, we decided that we would find mysteries so that things would be getting more and more mysterious rather than more and more shut down. And so we developed these 12 Gabrielite mysteries that I'm going to at least read through and tell you a little bit about right now. And each class, we're going to focus on 2 of these. Today, relational unity and uniqueness are the 2 that we're going to be speaking about. Relational unity, meaning a very special kind of connection, in that rather than being united with God in that our distinction is gone, or being in the linear kind of perspective where we're cut off from things, we are both in connection and at the same time having our distinction, so that all the beauties of manifestation really are brought back to the one. In because the purpose of creation, as we've probably most of us have heard, was that the divine being wanted to be known, wanted to be loved, wanted to have others so that there can be a relationship. So relational unity, and then also uniqueness, which I'll be speaking quite a bit about, the special quality that each one of us has, and the purpose that emerges to find that uniqueness and value that uniqueness of each individual, which really changes the whole story. So those are 2. Another of the mysteries is called interconnectedness. And some of these have a science meaning also, and Nazarbash is good at bringing out those science kinds of understandings, but that we are connected with all that there is, and there are many ways and stories to tell that. Another is multiple dimensionality. We've worked quite a bit in the series that we were just teaching earlier about multiple dimensionality. But we'll speak much more about it together. I think that's all I'll say about that. And then we have time is not what we think. So it's like, well, we think we know about time, but there's something very different about time. And it's quite a mystery. We feel that there again is an interconnectedness in the way that time works. And also you're going to see that all these mysteries are intertwined with each other. It's kind of a wonderful task to kind of pull them out and see them and then snap them right back into the rest of the mysteries. The unfolding path is another mystery. This means that rather than think that, well, we are on this path and we're going to be learning these things 1, 2, 3, and moving along this path, the path actually keeps changing, and maybe it has to do with the multiple dimensionality. It can, it's not one line for sure, but there are many ways of moving on the path, and things become transformed one section of the path to the next. One really important mystery is the meeting place. We'll find to our delight, if you haven't already, that really that we are manifesting in a very different way than we think. Those things that we identify as ourselves really are on another, let's see, another category than where things are created and made, and where our the essence of our practicing takes place. This all gets done in what we have called before the Barzakh, which is a term in the ancient Sufis and in the Zoroastrian tradition. And it is a place that actually stores all the beauties of the things that are created. Now, remember, we spoke about uniqueness already, but in our unique way that we are as human divine beings, finding a way to create and bring back as gifts to the divine. So it's a very special place, that meeting place. Another mystery is called new creation. And it is the idea that not only is there a recurrent creation, in other words, that everything is being created one moment after another, but we have to do with that creation. And those prayers of our heart and the discoveries that we make actually are transforming things in a new creation that we'll be speaking quite a bit about. It's very exciting mystery. Deepest desire as fuel is a mystery. This one meaning that what's in back of all of this is a desire. Well, we talked about the divine desire already. But each of us, as we look deeper and deeper into ourselves, find a deeper desire and a greater desire that becomes, as we say here, fuel for our whole journey. It isn't something from the exterior. It isn't something that that we can think of with our minds. It really all comes from the heart. Optimization of light. I want you to tell about that one.
So this is something I believe very deeply, that it's the nature of light, and I'm not talking about the light of a flash bulb or the usual point sources of light we think about, but it's the nature of light, of which everything is really a manifestation of. It's the nature of light to always seek to be able to come to a higher state of expression of itself. And so I think everything is moving towards that, not in a linear straight line, but gradually the capacity of, well, another way of saying that is the capacity for divinity to be expressed in existence is always increasing. And it's not just like you're pouring more of something into a container, you're opening up a reality in which there's the possibility of so much more expression to take place than was there before. And light is the conduit, we could say, for the divine qualities. Light is also the substance of which we are made. So if you think about it, it's pretty remarkable and kind of paradoxical. So we are a being of light, understanding through light, communicating through light with everything that is another expression of light. So it's like light revealing itself to itself and transforming itself through light.
The next mystery in the Gabrielite work is the fractal nature of existence. And I'd like you to tell more about that.
Okay, well, we'll be going more in depth to this later, but if you've ever looked at a plant like a fern plant, there's a property called self-similarity. The whole thing has a certain pattern, but if you look at tiny new growth that has the same pattern. So it's like there's a similarity in structure on different levels from large to small and so on. And to understand the multidimensional reality in which we exist, we can never possibly take in the whole thing at once. For one, we can never get outside of it all to look at it, but we can explore what I call our fractal neighborhood. So as we get an understanding of what relationships are like in whatever neck of the woods we're in, whether it's in manifestation or whether it's an inner state of meditation, then gradually we get a sense of what the totality is like. So that's the fractal nature of reality.
Okay, and then the greatest mystery is you, Y-O-U. So you can fill that one in yourself. If you want to talk to yourself about that right now, you can say a word or two. So these are the mysteries, and hopefully that you are very confused right now, that you have heard some things that have piqued your interest, but really aren't quite sure what all these things are. They're your surprises and your gifts that we'll be unwrapping as we go along. Okay.
So some of you are familiar with the Sufi principles of fana, which means a shattering or breaking down, and baka, which means reorganization or rebirth or resurrection. And one idea we're going to be coming back to many times throughout the course of these classes is that we have to undergo a quantum shift or a quantum leap in our frame of reference, our basis for understanding. And that's not continuous. It's not just adding a little bit more here and there. It requires stages of letting go of the way that we were understanding things in the past, and even the way that we think things are supposed to be, and being open to a discovery of something and we don't know what it is. It's kind of like hanging out in the in-between space of mystery. So what Ravani Ra is referring to is a very good way of talking about that. Sense of confusion means, well, this is different than how I've understood things before. Well, wonderful, because we hope that what we're sharing will help you loosen the firm grip that we usually have in our fixed concepts about reality, including fixed concepts about spirituality.
So uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to present more about uniqueness tonight. That you are a unique being. And I'd like to begin, these are different quotes from the book that Azurba showed you on the Gabrielite Work, the section on uniqueness. And so I've picked out certain of them for you. First, God told Muhammad that he had to learn from his followers because each one of them had access to a unique aspect of divine wisdom. Not only what you know, but also how you know is unique. Also, how the light that comes into existence is changed by the light of your being that is unique. Your contribution transforms the light. So really our whole story is about light. And one thing that I'd like to add to this quote is that as we realize our own uniqueness, and you might say our own unique contributions, we're going to have an exercise more about finding our own, what are our own unique contributions. There is actually a change that happens to reality because of, you could say, the design that is cut by your own heart, or the design that is cut through your own being on all of reality. That is definitely a metaphor for you to be using in regard to it. But this kind of chiseling or changing the actual reality or the light of reality cannot happen if we are thinking through our mind that we are so and so, this other being that we really haven't learned much about. It's like representational knowledge is like that there's a representation of reality. And a lot of the times we're living in a representation of reality and thinking of ourselves as this representation of ourselves. But there's a certain point at which we really are living in the meeting place, which you'll find out more about, or coming from where we really are. It's kind of a process of self-reflection until we find that place where we are. And when we are in that place, then we can carve out the reality in a different kind of way than ever was before. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, back to what I was saying earlier about what we bring to the transmission. When we're wanting to become proficient with something, we would usually think about studying it. You know, we get books on it, we go to a teacher, the teacher teaches us things about it. And so we tend to think about spirituality in that way too. Well, it's very helpful to have a guide in the spiritual journey. And we certainly learn things from our teachers, but Hazrat Inayat Khan would say that the most important thing gained in that relationship is not something that comes through any of the words, but it's just through the transmission, the connection that happens. That something, I would say that it opens up something in us that makes available to us a revelation of wisdom that we can understand, and it helps us to further our own journey of awakening. It's revealed to us. It's not by our efforting to try to do something. And we're going to be talking about ways of working with spiritual practices that have a lot to do with this, instead of thinking, well, you know, if I do 5,000 repetitions of this practice, that should be really good. But it's better that you do 3 repetitions where you're really in a state of deep relationship with the practice and what's opened up to you and through you in your relationship with the practice, than many repetitions where you just feel like it's something separate from you that you're applying.
Great. So Ibn Arabi, we're going to be speaking of quite a bit too. He's one of the Sufis that we were talking about 1,000 years ago, was affected by what was brought from the Zoroastrian tradition. But he has a similar teaching to Hazrat Inayat Khan, who does speak of the uniqueness of our being. But he says, this is Ibn Arabi now, every soul has access to a unique part of the divine wisdom that no one else has or ever will have access to. So this is something that, again, this is the characteristic way that you have of a being that does change reality. This is the wisdom that you have that no one else has. It's kind of like having a light that will illuminate part of the creation that no one else can see just the way you see it. This is something that really brings the deepest value to human existence. You know, we wonder why we feel low key some of the time and feel like, well, I'm not sure what the meaning is of what I'm doing now. And well, that's because that we don't realize that uniqueness and how the divine really depends upon us to be able to see from our point of view, to become more clear and become more open, and then be able to share what it is that we see, and then be able to work with what it is that we see in reality. And this is only, everyone has this uniqueness, but of course, every angle is different than everyone else's angle. I love the angle and angel similarity in there. So we are all angels of the different angles that can together bring the picture into clarity. Some more from our book. Even if someone has not discovered this yet, it is ennobling to know that there's something infinitely precious about each soul that can only come through that soul. So let that be a boost and a source of meaning for you, that even though maybe it may not have become obvious to you, that there'll be little glimmers, you know, and you have had some glimmers already of what this means. But we can take it as almost like money in the bank. We have a fortune in the bank. We don't know it, but we are here to assure you that you do have that fortune in the bank. Also, this uniqueness is present on every level of existence, and it can never be lost. This is an assurance that we have from these deep teachers. Well, here's a beautiful section on each person's way of experiencing subtle realms. Each person's way is different. Two people who have each had an experience of the angelic realm will not have identical experiences, because each person brings the interface of his or her own soul, which is in contact with everything else in every realm of existence. So you are a connection between one realm, you might say, and all the rest of the realms. It's like you are the connective tissue between that. You want to say more about that?
Yeah, well, this has to do with purpose. I'll kind of zoom out from here. The spiritual journey, which we usually think of, our journey has a personal purpose, like I want to awaken, I want to become illuminated, I want to reach, in a different traditions, nirvana, mukti, moksha, the highest state of samadhi, and so on. But we usually feel like it's something that we're doing for ourselves, so that the way we think of ourselves, that somehow gets transformed into a higher state of being. That's wonderful. Sounds like we're signing up for. But I think what we often discover in the course of that process of awakening, what we thought was a journey whose purpose was just for our own benefit, it's actually ourselves enabling our unique participation in the divine spiritual journey. Imagine God has God's spiritual journey through existence and awakening to him herself through the relationship with manifestation. And each of us has a part to play, to contribute. And it's not just opening up a book that was hidden in the library, it's helping to write the pages of a book that had never been written before, except by virtue of our way of relating our light in connection with the light of whatever it is that we are experiencing. So as I said earlier, we can never take in the whole thing all at once. Our consciousness will always be focalized in a particular aspect of our being, but what we've been lately calling the backstory or the backstage of our being, we can come to an experience of all of that as ourselves, but now we're kind of focalizing through this one modality of experiencing.
Here's a little more adding to that. You contribute to and help to change and evolve what's in any realm through the light of your being. In every experience that you have at any level, whether it's the densest level of physical manifestation or the highest subtle realm of existence, there's an exchange of light, a two-way exchange of light. What is exchanged with that light may be referred to as the currency of that experience. This currency can be any of the divine qualities like love, beauty, wisdom, truth, or compassion. It's not the case that there's a light of divine beauty that comes to a person which remains the same all the time. That light is changed by the experience, the experiencer, and what it is that you're experiencing. So that all of your experiences changes everything that there is in that experience. For example, you might think the divine qualities are unchanging. So we might say love, harmony, or beauty, that love is love, and we just learn more about it and keep unfolding what is there. No, we're saying that the divine qualities are can never be the same, because each quality is epiphanized or brought out and individualized uniquely through each soul. So it is that everything, even all the qualities that you experience that we feel like, well, these are unchanging things, can actually be changed by your own existence. Nothing is ever the same because of the existence of you, the unique one, the unique being. And it is more true as we find out and understand more deeply what this uniqueness is. So I'd like us to do a practice together. And for some of you, this might be a new experience to be doing practices. So I'll say a little bit about a divine quality. And I mentioned love, harmony, and beauty as being some of the divine qualities. We're going to work with one right now. And these are mostly in Arabic because of the tradition through which they came in this Inayatiyya. And these have a special meaning based on the sounds themselves, because each sound, when they're put together, create sacred sound. and it has an effect on us, just the saying of the sound itself. But there is also that meaning to it, which elevates our minds and opens them to something new. The sound does brings us to another, we open to the sound, and then we open to that meaning. And then, like we say, the light of our own being shines upon this light. So we can concentrate on that as we work with this. And the word itself means uniqueness. The word is samad, S-A-M-A-D. And in this tradition, we say at the beginning of these divine words, Ya. And Ya means readings, or O, as if we're meeting a being. Because we don't want to think of these things as a concept either. We want to think of them as if we are meeting beingness, as if we're meeting, the closest we could come to it is meeting a person or a being. So if we were saying Ya, Samad, it's like we're meeting, almost like meeting ourselves is another way of thinking of it. We're meeting a being of uniqueness, or meeting that uniqueness within us as the unique one. So it's kind of open to how you think about it. And as we say it, Ya Samad, Ya Samad, you hear that it's kind of, it's not exactly the sound of Samad. There's a little change to it, Samad, that you are resonating it and allowing the vibration to go through you as you say it. Ya Samad. And remember that every time that you're saying a sacred word, you are having an effect on that word, and the word is having an effect on you. So it's Ya Samad, Ya Samad. So it's like you're resonating with it as if you are, and then being friends with this being, like you are welcoming this being and this energy that it contains. And you are opening to this possibility that of uniqueness, of somehow that this is different than anything else has ever been. So there's an excitement to it. So let's say this together. I'm going to say it a few times, and then I'll ask you to join in. Ya Samad, Ya Samad, Ya Samad. Go ahead and join me now. Ya Samad, 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 Ya Samad. Let's pause for a minute. So remember, we're shining the light of our being, or you could think of it as opening your heart and this light comes out, and then you're receiving the light from Samad. Uniqueness, it's like a reminder of uniqueness, an excitement of greeting this uniqueness. Ya Samad, Ya Samad, Ya Samad, Ya Samad, Ya Samad. One more. Ya Samad. Now we'll be breathing and thinking of the meaning of the word. So in this case, either you say it as you inhale or exhale when you do this part of it. And this is called the fikr of the practice. So for this one, let's do it as we exhale. We'll think uniqueness. We'll think that this uniqueness is now emerging in our being as we exhale. As we inhale, we just inhale. So we won't be saying anything aloud. We'll be just saying it within. As we exhale, we'll think Samad. So go ahead and begin. As you inhale, you just inhale. And then again, as you exhale, you just think some mud. Continue. And now we can drop the words themselves and just, this is called the fikr asir, which means the secret of the practice. So as we say, as we think of that meaning, the essence of this, just thinking of that uniqueness or that surprise, that special value of uniqueness. Okay, let's pause here. Now, when you do this practice at home, it might be helpful to think about what is unique that you bring to life. What is unique that you feel most energized by? What is it that is kind of a clue for you, that you notice that this is there when something really new is emerging for you? And when you feel like you're shining that light upon the light. So take that as a practice for you for this week. So now, Azerbash, you have something for us?
Yeah. Now we're going to talk some more about what we call relational unity. So in the usual way of thinking about things, particularly related to spirituality, there's generally only two choices on the menu. One is the state of duality, which is our usual state of function and perception, the world of our physical senses and our concepts and our emotional responses, where we feel separated from what we're experiencing. And in many spiritual traditions, manifestation is thought of either as being an illusion, such as in Hinduism, it's described as Maya. It's just kind of the divine dance, but it's really illusory. Or it's thought to be a place where there's been kind of a fallen of the divine into existence, and the purpose is to go back to the way things were before there was a creation, to restore things to the way that they were. And how is that often understood is through a dissolving of personal identity and merging back into the source. So in yoga, oftentimes the aim is something called nirvikalpa samadhi, which means without seed. So it's a state of total unity, which is completely indescribable. There's no longer any personal identity. It's a state of being merged with this infinite ocean of bliss. Well, as I mentioned in Sufism, the aim is not to go back to the source and dissolve. And the aim is not to remain in a dualistic state, because that doesn't bring fulfillment to us. In fact, that generally brings a lot of frustration, because we can't fulfill the deepest desire of our being, which is to fulfill our divine purpose. So perhaps sometimes you've gone to a favorite restaurant and you like it, and you just have your favorite dishes on the menu, and then someone tells you can order off the menu. You can pick something that's not listed. Well, what's unlisted here, or what has typically been unlisted, is a state called relational unity. And what is relational unity? It is a modality of relationship between ourselves and whatever it is we're experiencing. And that relationship can be in the manifest world. It could be with a person. It could be with a beautiful place in nature and so on. Or it can be within our inner life, our relationship between a subtler level on which our being exists, such as the angelic level, or it can be tuning into a great being, a master saint or prophet in the inner realms and feeling that deep connection. But what's different about relational unity? Well, in relational unity, our identity is preserved, but it's not rigid. It's not based on thinking that we stop at the boundaries of our skin, or even our concepts of who we are in the inner realms. I don't think, at least I don't picture myself, if I'm imagining a higher state of being, as bringing my physical body up there and moving around. I have a consciousness, but there's a kind of a sense of identity that isn't lost, but it's a way of relationship in which things are very permeable. There's a circulation with whatever it is that we're experiencing. And the Sufis say that there's a light upon a light. So again, our words make it very challenging to give a description of this, because we usually would think, well, okay, the light's going this way, now it's going that way. It's going here, it's going back over there. But in actuality, there's a circulation which isn't the way we usually think of, like water circulating through a pipe. It's like every part is in contact with every other part, and it's like everything is opened up through every part to every other part. There's this interplay of light. And what's the effect of this? Well, the Sufis say when there's this two presences come together, a third presence is born. So something is born from this circulation of light that couldn't have been there from either side by itself. And it's in this new light that arises that we can fulfill our divine purpose. This new creation takes place. Well, it's taking place anyway, but now we can participate in it. Now we can bring something to it that is brought forth through our human divine relationship. And we'll be coming back to this. You'll find in the Gabrielite work, we have all these different mysteries, but each one is really related to all of the other mysteries. But we can't talk about 12 things at once, all being related to every other part of the 12 things. But we're kind of, as Ravani Ross said, we're coming in from different angles, and we'll be repeating some things. And an image that's come to my mind is, imagine that over the course of these 6 weeks, we're going to be discovering and creating a multi-dimensional tapestry. We're going to be weaving it together, and we're going to be able to, we can't see the whole thing, we're seeing like a part. Well, this is the part that connects with this other part, and now we're seeing some pattern emerging over here. Now we bring in another aspect of it. Now we see this other pattern. Well, if you're familiar with the Magic Eye books, which were put out many, many years ago, they would have a picture that just looked like a jumble of nothingness, random whatnot, but the instructions would be to offset your focus on this. And when you got it just right, this three-dimensional image would just appear to pop right out of the page. And once you saw it, it would be there for you. And it was like, wow, how could this have been there and I couldn't have seen it before? Well, the way all these other levels on which we exist are kind of like that three-dimensional image popping out. We can't perceive them until we develop a different capacity for perception that's not dualistic, and it's not dissolving our identity into something else. It's being in this state of relational unity. So we'll just do a little sampling here because we just have a little bit more time for this class. And let's just think about the idea of presence. So let's think about being present to something. Well, the first thought that probably comes to your mind is, okay, I put my screen aside. I'm not going to look at that text, even though I'm getting a little buzz saying wants to come in. I'm going to devote my attention right here. I'm going to bring my thoughts here. I'm going to bring my emotions here. I'm going to really be right here in whatever situation I'm in, whether it's with another person or so on. So let's say it is with another person. So perhaps think back to a time when you were having a conversation with a dear friend, perhaps about something spiritual. And at first, you're just sort of talking about things, catching up on things. And even when you start talking about something that's spiritual in nature, at first it's like, well, you're in your ordinary state of consciousness and you're sharing your concepts about this or that. But when you reach that point of really connecting with each other, you probably had this happen many times before, you find ideas starting to come to you that you couldn't have thought of before. And the other person is having the same experience. And now your conversation is at a place where this just kind of amazing things are coming out that neither of you would have been able to cook up on your own. And oftentimes I feel like in the things that we've written, the Gabrielite manual, like even in the passages that Ravani Ra read, it's like, wow, this is really good stuff. How in the world did one of us or both of us come up with this? But it was coming from that state of revealed knowledge and inspiration. The book I mentioned earlier, the Upgrading the Operating System of the Soul, I'll go back and look at parts of that and go, I don't know how in the world I ever came up with this. Well, I didn't come up with it. I didn't sit there and think, I think this might fit in right here. I was able to tap into that place where this inspiration would come through. And I'm sure everybody watching this or participating live or later watching the video on YouTube has had an experience like this. You've been in some circumstance. It could be in some beautiful place in nature. It could be with another person. It could be an inner experience where you felt just totally plugged in. Things seem magical. Time seemed to be suspended or slowed down. And if you were out in some amazing place in nature, Yosemite or the Grand Canyon or Big Bend or someplace like that, it's like you just felt in this state of wonder, and everything seemed clearer, more beautiful. It was just kind of a magical state you wish that you could just remain in. And then when you go back to your usual dualistic state, you have memories of that state you're in before, and you just try to make yourself get back to that state, but it doesn't ever work like that. It's something that has to arise now in how you're relating to whatever it is that you're relating. So we always have this opportunity of shifting into a state of relational unity with whatever it is that we are experiencing. And that can include while you're listening to Ravani Ra and I share in this class, and in just a bit, we're going to have a time when we'll allow everybody who wants to be able to share something that's come through that's meaningful to them. But see if you can be in that state of feeling this connectedness with whoever is speaking and realizing that distance doesn't matter. I mean, some of you may be hundreds of miles away, but that doesn't matter. There's a level in which we're all deeply interconnected with each other, even though this external form, which Pir Vilayat would call our spacesuit, which is our vehicle for experiencing the conditions of planet Earth, might be physically located one here and one over there. The essence of who we are is pervading throughout all of it, regardless of distance and regardless of time. So you want to add anything to that?
Mm-hmm. So I have a homework assignment for you. I used to be a teacher. I'll show you a picture here. So this is first of all, here's a little leaf here that I found as I was walking. And then here's an experience I had with that leaf that I used some colors to I just say interact with, not necessarily make all the same lines on it. But as we all intellectually know, every leaf is different. Each is unique. And so sometimes we find out more about ourselves by looking in the world, especially the world of nature. And we find the beauty in this leaf. We find the lines in the leaf that somehow are expressing things that we never knew before. So it's allowing that reality, that uniqueness of reality was really there to break through the way we usually think that all the leaves on the tree look kind of the same to me. There they all are. So try that. However, whichever way you would like to experience it, maybe photographer and just seeing it way differently than you saw it before, or actually a work of creativity of art, and see what that might teach you yourself.
And a thought that triggered in me, Hazrat Naib Khan said there is but one sacred scripture, and the leaves on the tree are pages of that scripture.
That's right.
So very much related to what Ravani Ra just shared. And also with that, instead of thinking of scripture as something fixed, like we do, well, here it is, it's written, unchanging or whatever, that each of our lives is continually unfolding the divine story, and we're actually adding to what's written on the leaves of the trees. That's part of that sacred scripture. So the scripture, and here's another little take-home assignment to think about as you're going through your day, whatever it is you're doing, however mundane, frustrating, boring, whatever it might be, feel that you are writing the divine scripture. You're adding your part to it that can only come through you. And just like when you're reading a novel, well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to read a novel where every page is the sun is shining and it's beautiful and everybody is skipping through the fields. I mean, I like mystery, I like drama, I like action. So you got to have some ups and downs and so on. So even in the midst of the difficulties, feel like, well, this is the divine scripture being unfolded. There's a wisdom gain through this, that when I can enter into a state of relational unity, that I'm contributing to that wisdom. So try that on for size.